Hello, hello. Welcome, friends, to the End Evil podcast. This is Chris Jansen, and evil is the destruction of freedom. This podcast is, I've been running it for a few years now, at least two. Haven't I should keep track of the date it started, but I'm really proud to say that over time, um, we've just been keep running every week. We try to keep going every Thursdays, and always trying to welcome new folks in. And so tonight I'm going to do another roundtable discussion. If anyone's around to join me for a chat. But before we get started on that, I wanted to just share with you guys some really awesome things that I think you'd like to hear about. We recently did an episode with a friend of mine from Autonomy. And if you haven't heard of Autonomy, I recommend checking it out. You can go to my website, andevil.life. And on the sidebar, there's a little square if you go on any episode that shows the Autonomy logo there. And if you click on that, you'll learn more about it. But a friend of mine, Agnieszka from Autonomy, was recently on my show. And it was a good episode. And it was called Somatic Body Activation. Is that what it was called? Let me bring up I have right here on my computer the recent show we did, and I'll share that with you. Oh, well, I guess I can't just show the image the way I was planning. But here's her website, and I'll share with you the new website logo. Her new website is called ownyourbodylanguage.com. And here I'll show you what that looks like. And she's doing classes, and these classes are coming up. And a lot of people showed interest after seeing that episode I did with Agnieszka. And I always want to remind folks that you can check out the YouTube page and the YouTube channel, and you can find there the recent episodes under the live tab. So she's doing upcoming classes on Tuesdays and Fridays. And if you go to ownyourbodylanguage.com, you can click the button and set yourself up to check out these classes and learn about how to read faces, how to read bodies, how to really understand yourself better too. It's powerful knowledge, and I recommend to check it out, folks. So yeah, like I was saying, if you go on YouTube, don't forget to check the live tab. That's where all the recent shows are. I haven't got them all loaded up to all the other sites yet. And by the way, I'm looking for help. If somebody would like to volunteer some help for the End Evil podcast, I could totally use some help getting uploads done. Something I've been having a heck of a time keeping up with. But recently I've been very excited about the Seed Conference, which is coming up September 23rd and 24th. And that event's just so full of awesome speakers. I want to show you a quick little glimpse of the website, seedtruth.com. And, you can there's just such an amazing lineup of people for this event coming up. And I know myself, I've been working for hours and hours getting my presentation ready. And everybody else who's presenting is doing the same, I'm sure. Cramming it in here, getting everything ready. It's going to be multi-streamed on multiple platforms. There's 2 full days just packed in of awesome speakers. You can sign up with your email address on seedtruth.com. James Cordner is going to speak, Brandon Spencer, Nate Kapp, Douglas Martin, Brandon Martin, Mark Devlin, Logan Hart, Leslie Powers, Will Keller, myself. Mine is The Trap Within a Trap, Brian Easterday, Dorian Greens, Patty Lager, Mark Passio, Dylan McCormick, Seth Cusboza, Corey Enderlat, Chris Nelson, Indica Martin. It's just, it's going to be an incredible event, and I'm really looking forward to that, and I can't wait to see you guys there. I know it's going to be a long weekend because those days are just going to be packed in. It looks like we got some folks in the chat. Welcome, Chris Nelson and Sarah And Libercast, that's um, and Jerry and Brandon Martin. We got a bunch of awesome people here. So I'm going to go ahead and put the Restream link in the chat. And if anyone wants to join me today, you can come on in and join me for what I wanted to talk about today is principles. I had a pretty difficult conversation. Oops, I just put I put in the chat just now the website my friend Agnieszka that I was sharing with y'all. But I am now going to find the link to today's show, which I thought I put right there. Oh, I see what I did. Got a little bit lost in the mix there, but I will get that going in just a second for you guys. I want to have some friends join, so I'm going to need to give you guys the link. So I misplaced it. So I'll just get it from. Is that it? Maybe someone can test this out for me. See if that is the correct link. If anybody pops in, then I'll know I got it right. And yes. Anyway, so I was going to tell you guys a story. I got a little distracted trying to figure out the link here. But I was going to tell you guys a little story. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was telling me about back when people were all wearing masks, and there was a person in line at the DMV, and um, somebody in the line said they didn't want to wear the mask, and that was holding up the rest of the line. And this person, friend of mine I was talking to, was further back in the line and got frustrated with the person who did not want to wear the mask, and went and asked that person to comply, basically, so that everybody didn't have to stand out in the hot sun waiting forever. And so we had kind of a difficult discussion about that. Okay, that must have been the wrong link. Here it is. Okay, I just put the link in the chat, friends. Anybody that would like to join me, go ahead and jump in. If you want to join me in the conversation, please have your headphones, because otherwise we can get feedback if your speakers are playing out loud. Yeah, I'm sorry. Chris just mentioned in the chat that it said this event already ended. The first time I used their old link, I found a new one, and there it is. Yeah, Chris. Cool. Okay, so we know it works because Chris is here. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, nice to be back. I got a flu. I'm under the weather. Just nowhere.
You're a little quiet. Can you maybe turn up your mic just a little bit?
Yeah, give me a minute. I'll see if I can fix that.
Oh, I can hear you. So yeah, I was having this difficult conversation with a friend, and we started talking about principles, and I get kind of heated on the issues regarding the COVID, the things that happened during that period of time, especially the masks. That really rubbed me the wrong way. And so, hearing how some of the other people dealt with that and the situations they got into really kind of just brought up this whole idea of principles, and how do we actually align more with principles in this crazy world we're in these days, where the lines are blurred, basically. Any thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, well, people don't really understand what principles are, so that's the problem. It's what's in the consciousness that is going to drive everything else. So if they don't even understand that they're enslaved, because it all works by definition. So if you don't have the accurate definition of what something is, then you can't know if you have it or if you lost it. And yeah, it's pretty horrible, the level of compliance with just arbitrary dictates from the would-be masters. And yeah, it's a conundrum to figure out. If it wasn't for people speaking up about the problem, there'd be a lot of people who wouldn't be aware of it, or at least at a deep enough complexity, I suppose, philosophically. But I always say the past sorry. I would say the past 3 years are a blessing, um, because chaos is a teacher and suffering is a teacher. And think of all the people who like started stuff or who got more aware of the problem because of what happened. One example is like Del Bigtree. Before this, he had no clue about the actual open conspiracy, and for him it would have just been nonsense. But he's I think he's interviewed Corbett. I'm not sure, but the same for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He has Corbett on, I think, one of his morning shows. Like he had him on several times on one of the guests there. So all of this has helped people awaken to the deeper levels of tyranny and enslavement that we live in that they would not have seen otherwise. And they would still continue in whatever awareness they have, whether it's for the risks and potential dangers of any injection that you put into your body, or the severity of what we have now, or the severity of what will come later. That's why I view it as a blessing. Chaos is a teacher. It's the only way to get people to wake up to some of the enslavement. And they realize that, oh yeah, well, they probably don't call it enslavement yet. They need more education into terms to have that proper definition. But they're aware that the world doesn't work the way they thought, and that's the beginning of the true awakening. As far as I'm concerned, that's what did it for me in 2006. Was the catalyst that you know I watched Terror Storm, and well, this isn't how I thought the world worked. It was so shocking that then that started me on my knowledge quest, my quest for truth. I'll end it there.
What? Oh yeah, look, Fred just he said he'd join us in a few minutes here. That's Libercast. Chris, what was the catalyst for you to kind of like get that reality slap?
Well, there was a torrent site, so I was back into torrents, I guess, as soon as they came out, almost, I guess. And there was a big one called Supernova, and that one got shut down. And then eventually I went to a private tracker where you had to have an account to sign in. And I was just getting bored of everything. And then finally, like this thing, Terror Storms. I've always been, I don't know, interested by conspiracy theories, but never looked into them. Like whenever there's movies of like conspiracies going on, I'm like super into it, and all the subterfuge and the deception and trying to uncover it and the mystery behind that and all that's always interested me. But I was still I didn't have enough care to, I guess, look into it actually or give it any attention to ignorant or arrogant or whatever. And but there was a torrent for Terror Storm by Alex Jones. I was like, oh, well, this looks interesting. So I watched it, and I only got halfway through. I only got up to the part where it talks about the John Yoo memo. I don't know if you're familiar with this,
No.
but the John Yoo memo was like, I don't remember if it's authorizing, but it was a memo. It was essentially authorizing the torture of enemy combatants' children in order to get them to confess or to just make up whatever the torturers wanted them to say. That's how it works oftentimes. And that just really shook me to my core. It wasn't even, as most people in the past 3 years, it had to be something personal for them. They were affected by the increase, the ratcheting up of slavery, the increase in tyranny. And then they started to care when it happened to them. But for me, it was this happening to other people and realizing, whoa, that's like mind blowing. And I had to put it down and like process that. And I looked into it, and you can find the memo. It's a true thing. And yeah, and then eventually I watched the second half. But that started me on my knowledge quest to like, that was my catalyst. There was suffering. It wasn't suffering for me, but it was suffering for others. And then that got me to care more and to seek out more. So then I eventually got into Alex Jones for like 9 months, and then moved on from there progressively to different things until you get to Passio, and then that's like the best source of information I find. And yeah, and then you get to really understand things a lot more deeply.
Yeah, it seems like for so many of us that can opener is actually a very bitter pill. People use that the black pill term. You know, but I've also heard Richard Grove say, he likes to white pill. That's his style. Information. He connects the dots. and I think he's another powerful speaker. You got Larkin Rose out there, and we've just recently seen the Jones Plantation. But I came across quite a few podcasters on my journey, just looking up the subject of freedom. It became my interest, and the more I looked into freedom, anybody that did a podcast about freedom, it started kind of exposing me more to these concepts. But the thing that concerns me with what we see going on now, where, like you're saying, so many people kind of got shaken. I think a lot of people got shaken by the whole experience the of the pandemic, of the scamdemic, and it pushed people in these, like I'm saying, awkward situations, standing in lines with people elbow to elbow over toilet paper, and pushing each other around over masks or vaccines, all these uncomfortable situations. I think it was a traumatizing event for a lot of folks. But my concern is a lot of folks are going to say, oh, there's a problem, and we see like this huge movement with um, the right conservative calling out the ridiculous things that the left are doing, which is true. But a lot of times it wants to stop there, or the solutions are a new person in power or a new government, or just change the rules. And that's where I really find myself disagreeing with folks and saying, like, we need to get back to the principle of the thing. And like you're saying, Chris, the word principle itself is not well defined. So I think a good place to start is to do a little bit of that defining work. I looked it up on just what is this new Webster, just your basic dictionary. And it defines principle as a noun, a comprehensive and fundamental law, doctrine, or assumption, a rule or code of conduct, a habitual devotion to right principles. That's just giving you a little more context. Um, the laws or facts of nature underlying the working of an artificial device. Um, an underlying faculty or endowment, an ingredient that exhibits or imparts a characteristic quality. Looks like we got Sarah joining us. Let me bring Sarah in. Welcome, Sarah. And then I looked up the etymology of principle, and it comes from origin, source, beginning. And it's like a basic assumption, Latin principium, which is a beginning, a commencement or origin. So, sometimes the way I think about it is you could question anything. And the more you ask questions, the further you can go into a topic. But it's a difficult thing to do, is to be able to keep asking questions until you back up against something that is like, that's as far as you can go, and that's when you get to a principle. And I think that's kind of like what philosophy is really ultimately all about, is to try to discover principles. And it's kind of like, from my point of view, it's almost like digging in the earth. There are things you find that they just are what they are. People can argue about what we should do with them, but a rock is a rock, and a black rock is a black rock. We can all agree on usually that basic concept. And I think that's basically, origin is as deep as you can go with the thing. I don't know. Does that make any sense, Chris? What do you think about the definition there?
Yeah, I have some slides from a presentation I haven't completed on the law of freedom. And yeah, two I got. One was from lexico.com, is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior or for a chain of reasoning. The second one from that site is a general scientific theorem or law that has numerous special applications across a wide field. And the Cambridge Dictionary says a basic idea or rule that explains or controls how something happens or works, like the principles of the criminal justice system. Those aren't founded on true justice, though, but they, they have principles. And what I get at in this presentation is that you can put anything first in your life as a foundation to build upon, to because that's what Ma'at was in ancient Egypt. It was a plinth, and that's like where you put a statue on, and it holds up the statue or the pillar. And the plinth was the foundation. So the plinth, ma'at, is supposed to be the foundation. Ma'at represents truth, moral truth, righteousness, justice, law. So that's what's embodied by that symbolism, is that's what's supposed to be our actual foundation. But anyone can put anything as their principle. So you can make up things that are, you can put things that are true as your foundation that might not be as important as moral truth, and you put them above moral truth, so that's still a failure. But you can also invent things like, oh, well, survival of the fittest. That's how I'm going to live, and that's my first principle. So principles can be false and they can be true. So there's true principles and false principles, but the principle itself, like looking at the etymology as well, it's, the beginning, the foundation. It's the first catcher from primus and ceps. So it's the thing that sustains everything else that you build on top. And yeah, so people can hold fundamental assumptions or beliefs in things that are false and incorporate them into their state of being as a principle to drive their behavior and their motivations forward.
Thanks, Chris. Sarah, you got your audio working?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming in clear. Welcome. Thanks
I
for
w-
joining us, Sarah and Fred. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. Why don't you add something? You were able to keep up with what Chris and I were just talking about, the definition of principle?
a little bit. I was trying to use my tablet because it's a little bit easier, but I think these headphones are on their way out, so it messes with the tab, and then we'll suddenly just cut off all volume. So I couldn't really hear
Oh, that's all good.
a lot of it. It was in and out, but
Yeah, I totally get that. I'm like constantly dealing with audio issues. Everyone I know understands my frustration with that about audio issues. It's like one thing or another. But yeah, well, glad you joined us. On to let's see if Fred, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Chris? I'm doing fine, but I'm busy as hell. This new web design course is keeping me busy, man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I decided to go forward with. I was inspired by you guys and the one great work in the course that Mark Passio's how to be the true media gave me a lot of inspiration for that. So I decided to go forward and do a course on that. So I mean, I didn't want to go back working in the factories and have these shitty jobs, and I wanted to do something better with my life and in at the same way helping the great work and helping people around me.
Right on. That's exciting. Um, I've also been like super busy recently because preparing for the Seed Conference, which is coming up quick. You guys saw all that advertisements on that, obviously, but yeah, it's busy time. I got something I could share here. Let me see if I can bring in my share screen. Since this is the End Evil podcast, I looked up Jeremy Locke, what he had to say on principles. And he has this section right in chapter 2 that says principle versus law. And he says to understand how evil controls people, it is necessary to understand the difference between principle and law. A principle is a truth that creates freedom. A law is a lie that creates slavery. And but just that alone, right there, is a pretty good start. Principles describe reality, so I think that's huge. Just that by itself, the difference between law and principle. I think many folks that I have discussions with, they get kind of lost in that in law being rules, and the person who I was having this discussion with about that I was describing earlier in the show is like everybody standing in a mask in a line, and somebody's holding up the line, and this person's getting frustrated with that person who is arguing with the DMV person about, having to take their mask off. And I was in similar situations, and I asked myself about principles. Well, on one hand, you shouldn't even be at the DMV if, in principle, if you're a true anarchist, right? Like, you wouldn't even deal with those people, right? But there's a lot of aspects of our society where we've compromised to a certain extent. We'll drive a car even though we know that gas comes from evildoers who are using that money, or these corporations, like Amazon. Like, there's always like slippery slopes in a lot of things we do in society. But how do we go back to being more people of principles and making our life choices out of a place of what's right from principle, and not just what we have to do because that's what everyone else is doing, or that's what our society is pushing us into. So maybe that gives you something to jump off on, Sarah.
Yeah. Oh, I do have a couple of thoughts by that. Whenever I think about stuff like that, I think about, well, when I was younger, there was somebody somewhere in my childhood who kind of instilled in me that if you want to set an example, then you lead by example. And oftentimes it's like, you ever hear of, like, children don't hear what you say. They see what you do. So when you behave a certain way, that's going to, like, absorb a lot more into the subconscious than just saying you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way, or whatever, or just even teaching them, like, principles of, natural law or God's law, whatever people want to call it out there. But just understanding that when you show them how to behave, then it actually makes a difference in how they behave as adults. So, because it's like leading by example. And and you could practice this with, like, little things all throughout your life with all kinds of different things. Like, you were talking about your story with the DMV, and the guy was getting upset about having to wear a mask in the DMV. Well, a couple of years ago, I never wore a mask throughout the entire thing. I just flatly refused to, out of principle, and standards of my own health. So I there was one experience I had where I went into a Joann's Fabrics to get a couple of things I needed for a commission. And I'm the only one in there at that time without a mask on, because this was during the thick of it. And there's this whole line of people all wearing masks. And I'm standing there in the line, and of course, everybody around me is, like, very, very, very far away from me because they're all, like, tripping out. But then there's this one guy right behind me, and he's, like, looking at me. And I can feel him looking at me. He's like, 5-10 minutes, he's just looking at me, watching me stand there without a mask. And he goes, yeah, okay. And he takes his mask off, like, not pulls it down, takes the whole thing off. And we were talking a couple of minutes, and I don't even remember what it was, probably something anti, establishment, something. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, you know what? And he, like, takes his mask off. And the woman behind him immediately jumps back like 3 feet. So I kind of figure when I'm in situations like that, or even when I'm with my kid and situations like that happen, I kind of just stand my ground the way that I'm going to do things. And other people, even if it's just one person, might take that in and be like, yeah, okay, I see, you're not afraid, and why should I be? And they'll see that, and that in itself could give people that little bit of boost of bravery that they might need, because they're seeing somebody else not cower down to whatever the supposed rules are.
Right. I had a couple pretty inspirational moments like that too, but on the other hand, then there were the other moments like the one in that story where it's kind of the opposite. Like the person who is trying to stand up for what I think's right, is getting harassed by the other people in the line because now that person's holding up the line or that person's a different one. And a lot of people
Yeah.
really did think in their own head that if you weren't wearing a mask, that was somehow dangerous to others. And they believed that narrative. So in their head, you know, you are doing the wrong thing. Not only are you not following the rules, but you're also getting in the way of them exercising their freedom to do what they need to do and slowing down their process. And I
Yeah.
understand the point of view, even though I disagree with it. And so to me, that's where we have to kind of like take it to principles to really sort out what's right and what's wrong. And is it just right because I'm saying it or because I think it, or is it because it's right inherently? And people just need to understand the difference between right and wrong, which is what I think. But why people have so much trouble seeing that I talk to in the public, friends, family, is still mind blowing, and still, I think one of the main reasons we have these discussions so we can work through these topics and like how do we bridge these gaps. Any thoughts, Fred?
Yes, actually, I wanted to add on Sarah's talking about children, and I wanted to bring I took a note there, and what something that is intimately attached to that is the principle of causality. And causality is how I deal with my children. I mean, they do something, there's a consequence to it, and then I explain to them, if you do something or you move something or you say something, there's actually effect on what you're doing. And if you're doing evil deeds, if you're doing wrong to people, you're gonna actually, it's gonna come back. You know, bad deeds, you get bad results. It's simple as that. You know, sure, you can learn them like fundamental principles, like fire burns. You know, water is good when you drink it, but you cannot breathe in it. Things like that. There are principles that we know that it's totally applicable on our everyday life, how you treat the others and things like that. And I mean, if we had to put all the natural laws into one, it would be the principle of causality. You know, everything is connected together, and then you have the behaviors and the consequences of living into a society that it's culturally driven. And when this culture is broken, perverted, and insipid, then the people are imbued with this principle of culture, you know? Because I mean, people are very influenceable when they don't know about what mind control is. They're very easily, and they're controlled and gullible and naive. So I mean, it comes in the two sides, both the masculine imbalance and the feminine imbalance, schisms. I would just to put an hiatus on Mark Passio's work on that, because I think it's a really relevant, on to the point information that every kid, everyone, every adult, every people should know, you know, that there's consequence to what we're doing, the decisions that we take as individual and societally. Societally, it's incredible,
Well,
the
that's
the connection.
good opportunity. What you're saying is a good opportunity, I think, Fred, to introduce the Hermetic principles. I think
Hmm.
all of us here are familiar with these, but perhaps listeners of the show might not have ever looked these up if you haven't checked out the Kybalion. This is sort of a good philosophy way of looking at reality, really. And I think, the ideas that Mark Passio talks about with natural law is encompassing these seven principles. And Fred just mentioned the principle of gender. and the principle of cause and effect, which are two great ones. Like you said, we can find lots of examples to share with children. And, you know, I think if we can share things with children, that's awesome. Those of us that are parents and that have an opportunity to affect, educate young ones, we can just share these things with them and they'll soak them in. The more difficult thing is to bring them back to full grown minds that aren't aware of these concepts. And how do we blend them into learning to that anybody can pick up on? I think has to be done through creativity in a lot of ways, is kind of what I've realized in my work, because just talking about it, you basically get people that already understand it. But mentalism is a big one too. The idea that the universe is mental and that all is mind. And I think ultimately, from my point of view, that's kind of like one of the biggest divides of terms of why people have such a difficulty with the idea of principles, is that they're not completely sure that reality is real. There's people that think that it can change, or you can have a truth and I can have a truth, and we can all, have our own version of what's right, but there's no actual one thing that is right or wrong. And, it's not easy to prove that is the case necessarily on one hand. And the other hand, it seems really simple to those of us who see that and get that. So how do we bridge that gap? Any more thoughts on that, Chris?
Well, you bring up a good point about the solipsism inherent with that idea, because people will take it as there is no reality. Um, there is no reality. Does that equate to reality is an illusion? Because Mark Passio has said that before. David Icke has said that before. But I view it differently. I don't view it as an illusion. When you say that at the fundamental level, everything is energy. Yeah, sure. But from that energy, it organizes into, maybe you could say, patterns or certain ways. And then things are constructed and build up. So you could take, for example, your house. Is your house not real? Just because what's real is the wood or the plastic or the metal, and that's what's actually real? If you're looking at it purely from a 3D perspective, well, the house is still real. It's just an organization and a construction of smaller units into larger units. So that's where I disagree that reality is an illusion, or other sayings that try to say reality isn't, oh, there's another one, reality isn't physical, but it is physical. That's one of the properties that emerge from the lower levels that build up, and eventually you get to the higher levels, and physicality is something that emerges. And yeah, if you go down to lower levels, then it's empty space, or whatever that empty space is filled with, either ether or who knows what. But these statements, I view them as not accurate because they don't actually represent reality accurately. Because as I'm pointing out here, there's another way that makes sense of it that makes a lot more sense to me than just to say that the physical reality is an illusion. There is no physicality. Every atoms are 99.99% empty space. Yeah, but what does that matter? The atoms come together and build solidity and physical reality. So the physical reality does exist, and that's where I exist, and that's where all of you exist. And we don't exist at the atomic level, and we don't exist at the quantum level, and we don't exist at the level of pure energy. We exist here and now. And that's where our work is to do, is if we want to make our lives, or potentially future lives, whether it's decades or hundreds or thousands of years, our goal, most of us here, is to end slavery or end evil. And to do that, you have to recognize the importance of where you are, that you are here, and this is where you are. You're not whether there's some ascended other dimension, or there's a fifth dimension or a sixth dimension we're going to ascend to, like a bunch of the New Agers believe to. Maybe. I think that's bullshit, but hey, maybe it's true. But that's not where I am. I'm here. So I'm not going to worry about other levels, higher dimensions or lower dimensions of the quantum world or the atomic world and try to relate everything to that, and as if that's the reality that I live in, because it's not. Those are different realities. So I'll just end that there.
So
I
you're
mean, there.
saying that
Sorry,
we do matter.
Yes, I
Sorry, I
have an
just
article on that
had
actually.
to get in that pun.
Matter. Oh Christ, I don't remember what it's called. I'll look it up, and but it's about. Earlier in my work, I was getting a lot into etymology links. So, matter matters is one of the things I said in it. But it's Mother Nature something. I can't remember. Anyways, I'll look it up and I'll mention it. But it's
Yeah.
about Mother Nature, and mother and is mater and matter. All you do is remove a T.
Ah, yes.
So they're linked. That's our Mother Nature, is this world of matter and
Hmm.
energy too there. But the whole universe is Mother Nature, like the Milky Way. That's what the symbolism was in ancient times, of symbolism to try to explain, uh, try to gain understanding or try to make sense of things external to us and internal to us by looking at what it looked like and what it could represent related to things that we understood. And that's how correspondence usually works, is we try to
Yes.
make correspondences from one thing to another. And sometimes the correspondences pan out and you come up with scientific discoveries or whatever, you come up with true knowledge. And sometimes the correspondences, though they may seem accurate, which is why I'm also not a 100% believer in or applier of the principle of correspondence, where you can just say, oh, well, it corresponds, therefore it's true. Well, I don't accept that, because that's not what determines if something is true. Just because you can create an analogy between A and A prime, and you can see a link, a causal link or something, and then you look at something and you're like, well, I see B prime and it's analogous to A prime, so therefore I'm going to extrapolate a correspondence between B prime and B at its source, and say that just because A leads to A prime, well, therefore this thing that is B that I can't verify, well, that also leads to B prime. Or inversely, if you have B, then you're going to say, oh, well, it leads to B prime. It's not that simple. You
It's
have to be able to
assumption,
verify it.
logical fallacy, basically, right?
Yeah, but that's the problem I have with the Hermetic principles, and they're accurate for understanding things. And obviously, everything that we create as humans comes from our mind, and we engage in actions, and then we create into the world. So that is true, but I'm not sold on. I'm not denying it either, but there could be an all, but I have no way of verifying that that thing is actually a thing, that it's the first cause, or maybe there's an infinite regress going backwards, and then there's a cause for the effect of the universe, and then that thing had a cause and effect. See, there's things I don't know,
Hey, I gotta
because
run for just a sec, guys. My fire alarm's going off. I'm gonna
okay.
let you guys chat, and I'll be right back. Sorry,
I take
Chris.
more of an agnostic position of I don't know, and if people can explain it to me in a way that can be verified, then I'll be like, yeah, great. And that's what I try to do in my work, is to explain things so that it can be understood and people can verify it on by themselves, such as how we think and the processes of the mind, or natural law. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Sorry about that. Luckily, there's not a fire, but our
That's good.
washer washing machine broke today and then started putting out smoke. I had to go make sure what was going down. Sorry, I missed the end of what you were saying there, Chris. But Fred, you were going to pop in.
The problem with uh, you just talked about this in your last podcast about denial, and it's directly connected to that. I think this spiritual infantilism is part of this regression culture that we are in. I mean, Chris explained this perfectly. The solipsist aspect and point of view, and I stumble upon these people during my great work, and it's very difficult to reason with these people. For the matter of the guy I was talking with was a Buddhist. He was considering him a Buddhist, but he told me that reality didn't exist, and I was not sure if you were real. And I was like, dude, if you cross the street and you don't look on both sides, you'll maybe die, and that's real. You know, the trees are real, the sun is real, nature is real, the people around you are real. It's a like spiritual mental illness. It's a condition. It's a mental condition we have there, and you have grown people that are actually roaming around and doing conferences and meetings and things like that, and they're shoving these lies into people's throat just to make them feel better about being lazy or being a bad person. You know, when nothing exists, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if the consequences, because the people don't believe in natural law. People don't believe in principles anymore. They believe into cult religions and laws and government and tyranny. This is what they're believing on in.
Well, even that word, gets tossed around, Fred. Like, I love what you're saying, but on the other hand, too, like belief. Should we believe in natural law, or is it something we should like know and discover? And when do we know that we know it? And when it's like people, I can kind of see other people's point of view in the way I talk sometimes, and I think you and I have similar experience. Is that like they'll be like, "Oh, you're saying you're right and I'm wrong," and they'll kind of start getting offended
Hmm.
by that, and that'll bring up that defensive. And I see how I'm coming across saying what I'm saying is the truth, and it just is what it is. Well, someone who's like a fundamentalist in a religion will say, "Well, I know it is because I have faith and I believe it." It's like, well, I'm saying I know what I know because I know it and I discovered it, and it's true across the board. But I understand
Hmm.
how that comes across to people in a way that causes a lot of resistance. Does that
I
make
mean,
sense? You
I
know
mean,
what I'm
I
saying?
mean, I do understand that perfectly. I've looked into natural law, and I consider that I understand them, and it has changed my life forever. I don't believe anything. I'm checking objectively the information that I have, and I try to go everywhere as much as I can to maybe some things that I look are like different point of view, different beliefs. They come from. I'm not dealing with beliefs anymore. You know, this is how I deal with people. If I'm talking about natural law to people, I'm not gonna tell them to believe it. I'm gonna tell them, go, just read it, understand it. Afterward, we can talk. You know, because if you cannot, there's nobody who can tell me that cause and effect doesn't exist, or mentalism. You know why? Because mentalism is how we build this world. This is the nature of nature. I don't know if I express it, if it I express it wrong, but
No, I
it's.
think you're doing well. It's oh yeah, Chris said the article he was trying to think of was the story of matter and nature, the mother's womb.
Hmm.
And yeah, nature, I love nature I think is a place of metaphors, for us to learn. Like we don't want to necessarily act just like animals do or like a plant does. But we can look at how they interact and that helps us understand concepts, and I think that's what's tricky about a lot of the things we're talking about is they're conceptual, but like Chris is pointing out, we are matter too in this world. So we're actually dealing with a lot of practical situations where if we were to be totally extreme with our what other people would call beliefs, but even what we're talking about more based on principle, it would put us, the more we base our decisions on principle, the more it would put us at odds with folks in society. And so we do to the point where we're willing or we're able, but we can't be 100% on most things. I mean, I can't. I'd like to more. I'd like to be more hardcore on all things. Like um, I try to pick every area of my aspect of my life: what I eat, how I treat my body, how I treat other people, my relationship with the government, with the education system. Each of these things, when I've come to these realizations and discoveries, I'm trying to kind of find a way to edge my way out of them or around them. But like my kids were already in school most of their lives by the time I came to realize these things. I already have a driver license and a car, and I'm like, do I want to just stop paying these fees and say I'm never dealing with these people again and risk the rest of my life, getting kidnapped by them? It's like, how far are we going to go with these things? And then when we share them with other people, they're going to be like, well, you don't do this or you do that, and so that's kind of where I think we live in a little bit of a rock and a hard place where there are gray areas. In principle, I would never eat any food that came from any kind of corporation that I don't like, for instance, or I would never even buy gas, because I don't really like a lot of the structure of the way our oil is built. The oil dependence is one of the things that traps us into their laws and rules. So, I mean, why don't you jump in, Sarah? What do you think about what I'm saying?
Oh, I agree. It's like a little bit complicated in the way where, like, some people want to call, oh, you're a hypocrite. And it's like, well, here's the problem. And like I don't know if like other people see this, but my personal theory is it's really not going to matter to too much extent if like we have driver's license, if we do this part or do that. That's like keeping us like in the stable part of at least somewhat of a stable part of society so that we can function to a certain extent. Because the real problem is that the cabal Satanists. And so nothing's really going to change until that group of people are done and gone with, and that they are not ruling the planet globally. Nothing will change. It won't change with waste on, how we waste plastic. There's tons and tons of plastic that's unnecessarily made for all sorts of things, that's like over the top. And people are worried about recycling and they're worried about this and they're worried about that. But I think they're all just symptoms of the greater disease. So, and I think that affects whatever government we have. I think it affects local government. I think it affects our local communities. I think it affects our medical institution, our educational institution. They all have a root, and it's because we have a power that's like controlling the entire planet, and it controls everything that we consume in our lives. And it makes it very difficult to just be completely off the grid of that, because like say in LA County, for example, it can be very tricky because in LA County, there are these like, I would want to have chickens and my own vegetable garden and like do my own thing or whatever. And they put fines on people who have certain things. So if you have your own like, OR water system reserve tank in your backyard in a residential area neighborhood, in your own backyard, if you have chickens in your own backyard, if you grow certain kinds of plants in your own backyard, you'll have the city come down and like bang on your door and fine you over and over until you get rid of it. So it's like also the area, it's like depending on the county, and it's like everybody else who's like all about it. So I think like I would want to do everything kind of, make all my own stuff as well. But it's so hard when they own everything and they've got so many people who are, walking around, kind of snitching to whoever the city council is or the local government or, tagging you for this or that or whatever. Like
Or your
they
own
even,
neighbors turning you in because it's
yeah,
like an HOA situation, or like I was saying, the other people in line because they have their things to get to, and they're like, "How dare you stand up
yeah,
for your beliefs when we all have other important things to go?" I have friends that got caught in the Bay Area when there was one of these kind of demonstrations going on, and people marched out onto the freeway and shut the freeway down, right? Well, then the people in the cars that need to get home to their kids and their family are like, "You're shutting down my freedom now," and it's like things are getting all convoluted, right? Like, because maybe the people standing up for whatever they're standing up for, in one of these busy cities like Oakland or something, maybe what they're standing up for is really noble and it's on principle, right? But I'm just some guy heading home and they're standing up for it in the way of me getting to something that's important in my life, right? And so, there's a clash, right? I can see where these situations can get pretty convoluted very quickly, and I've been involved in them. Some of these COVID situations, like that same friend who I told you about, who got stuck in that. He's been a lifetime friend. I love this guy, but we've had some disagreements. And when one time we were talking about the masks, he's like, "Well, it's the same thing as no shirt, no shoes, no service, right?" Like, and I started thinking about it, and I'm like, well, a public place, do they really have a right to tell you no shirt or no shoes? Like, why is that? Why do we accept that? Because the more I thought about that, we probably should have never accepted that type of thing because it's my freaking body, right? If I don't want to wear a shirt, now to me, it's a whole nother level covering up your your breathing holes. But hey, I did get the argument he was making. I'm like, well, maybe we shouldn't have accepted that. Why do I have to wear shoes if I don't want to? But we go along with some rules. So
yeah,
where's the principle end and begin? It does get tricky.
yeah. Oh, it can get tricky. And with a situation like that, I would only say I'm looking at it kind of at a, more of a hygienic and medical biological safety issue. So no shirt, no shoes. I can see a private business owner saying, "Yeah, I don't want that. I want you to have like at least a shirt and shoes in my business because little kids come in here." In Walmart, I would say, "Who cares about shirt and shoes?" But with because it's like Walmart. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that website, the people at Walmart.com. Check that out. That's just cracking you up all day. But with the mask thing, I'd say in every single situation, wearing a mask absolutely is a dangerous health hazard. And I don't care if it's a little health hazard and it's only going to affect you a little bit. And, if people want to wear a mask, go wear a mask. It's your body. If that's how you want to damage your body, by all means, it's like, to me, it's like the same as abusing alcohol. It's like you're just damaging your body. Have fun with it. But I wouldn't agree with it. I wouldn't accept it or go along with it myself because I understand that it is a dangerous health hazard and will physically damage people. So, I mean, I wouldn't put it on me. I wouldn't put it on my husband. I wouldn't put it on my child. And I wouldn't recommend anybody doing it. So, I mean, I can see a private business owner saying, "Put a shirt on when you're in my store because I own this business and I have little kids in here." But when it's like a corporate business, it's like, yeah, why would you they don't really have any leg to stand on to tell you how to dress. So that would be the only kind of maybe exception to that. Or if it's like a restaurant, if you're going into a restaurant and people are eating, maybe it's just kind of common courtesy, maybe to put a shirt on. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind. I
Well,
mean,
I
I'm
mean,
pretty easygoing about it, but that's how
I
I
think
would kind of see it.
everyone might pop in with their own, feeling on it, right? Like we might feel differently about how people dress or what they wear or don't wear, and whether we find it offensive or not. But is that a principle based decision, you know? And I think this is an important topic because, from my point of view, it's just a matter of time till something comes up in the public next, you know? The precedent's already been set. I personally, the thing I'm concerned with, like, would be maybe checkpoints of some type, you know? And if we're not making our decisions based on principles, but just based on how we feel about it, you know, we're going to run into one of these situations where these tyrannical folks are going to, you know, they're going to keep pushing the ball forward. They're going to keep trying the next thing, you know, whether it's next year or the year after or the year after that. It's going to be some kind of tyranny that's going to be another level of taking away freedoms or rights. And I think the principle of the fact that somewhere we have to draw the line of what's the boundary of what's mine. And to me, that's my skin, you know, the boundary of my skin. And I don't even want to get into people argument about property rights necessarily, because that can get even kind of tricky. But why don't we just start right there with the boundary of our skin? If it's something interacting with the boundary of my skin, it's fucking mine, and I get to choose what happens with it right up to the point when I'm harming somebody else, and that point would be the line in to me in principle,
Yeah.
because that's the nature universe that was created, that I actually have physical control and command over everything within the skin. Outside of it, not so much, except in my ability to manipulate with good sales or conversation, right? And other than that, it's force, it's brute force, which is crossing the line of the natural law from my point of view, which is
Yeah,
just
I
as
totally
anything you,
agree.
you know, yeah.
But it
Chris,
all
Fred,
comes,
either of you guys want to jump
yeah,
in? Go ahead,
it all
Chris.
comes down to property rights, though, because what you're talking about is your property. So for the store owner who can say you're not allowed to come in without boots or shoes or shirt and shoes or whatever, they can do the same thing with masks. If they live in fear and they're afraid, well, they can do it. And everyone else in society can choose to go to a store that isn't afraid. And what will happen to that business who is
Yeah.
trying to force people to do something? They will go out of business. So it doesn't matter if it's a small shop or if it's a large corp. There's owners, and I don't I don't agree with the corporate structure, but I'm saying, like, say you had whatever, there's regional chains of like franchises that aren't like super huge corporations, and you know, if you have someone that's the main owner and then he has franchises, well, he still gets to decide what the rules are for the business. So the same thing, if people don't like it, well, they can go somewhere else and then you're out of business. So this is why it all comes down to numbers. Everything we've been talking about is about numbers. The same thing with the person on the freeway or the people on the freeway. And it also deals with Satanism for complete, you're focused on yourself. So yeah, you have needs. The people want to go home to do whatever they got to do. Okay. But why are they protesting? What's, did a bunch of people just get murdered by the cult of Satan, the police? You know, is that what happened? Okay, so why don't you care about it? Because you don't care. Because you just care about me, myself, and I, and my little circle of my family and my friends around me. But imagine if those people who were upset, they got involved, and more people got involved to actually not comply and not go through the whatever the government wants. They wouldn't have a leg to stand on. And even more if people united together to defend each other, then everyone united against the goons of the state, the thugs of the state. Well, they couldn't combat everybody. And this is what happened in I think Czechoslovakia. There's a video by Academy of Ideas that came out yesterday on why are people so obedient. Compliance and Tyranny is the name of the video. I just watched it today, and he goes into that about Czechoslovakia. He's referenced it in other videos too. And people, it's like the only non-violent revolution where the government was toppled without like any I wouldn't say violence, I would say any self-defense to push back the evil. And that's just because more people united and more people came together, and then they just had no more support, and that's non-compliance. So I understand things from a personal perspective for the people on the highway. But when you have an injustice, I mentioned it in my presentation on true freedom, when you have an injustice taking place, your right to just do whatever you want, which is a basic right to do whatever you want as long as you're not violating the rights of others, well, that doesn't trump people getting together to try to bring justice to a grave injustice. They're trying to do something to bring an end to an injustice by bringing justice to it, even though the government's probably going to ignore them. That's beside the point. For what I'm making here is that they are trying to do something for outside of just themselves regarding an injustice to happen to maybe one person or 10 people. Versus the people in the cars, well, they might care to some degree, like, oh, that's awful. But, and then when they're stuck in their car, yeah, there might be issues of like, oh, your kid's at home alone or whatever. Those are other things. But the attempt to bring justice to an injustice is a higher right, a higher duty than just the basic right of doing whatever you want as long as it doesn't initiate harm to another. So yeah, and I was talking about numbers, and what Fred mentioned with talking to people about they're stuck in like the illusion of thinking everything's an illusion, it doesn't matter. Then you're not motivated to actually do things for the right reasons, and that's largely based. Those ideas are largely based on the pleasure trap, because it makes them feel good. These ideas make them feel good. They can just abdicate personal responsibility, do nothing, and everything's fine. The universe has it. Whatever the quantum field has it, God has it. Whoever they want to say has it. They don't have to do anything. So it's a cop out. It's wanting to stay an eternal child. And the ultimate problem, yeah, the dark occultists are a problem, the Satanists are a problem. But if all you do is like, I have Thanos' snap there, and I'm just going to snap them out of existence, other ones are just going to take their place. So ultimately, it comes back to us, the problem, and our consciousness, our state of consciousness, our devolved state of consciousness, and why people buy into things because it makes them feel good, these beliefs that feel good, or why people comply with tyranny and greater enslavement because they're in fear, and why people don't care about injustice when they're just focused on what they can get for themselves or their family, what they can get out of life that serves those ends. That's what I had to say.
Great points, Chris. Thank you for sharing that. Let's kind of go around last few comments from everybody, and then I'll probably close up the podcast tonight. I still got a lot of work to do to prepare for upcoming events, but I love this discussion, and a lot of things came up for me. So we'll continue discussions. We're going to do another roundtable, by the way, October 5th. Next week, no podcast because I'm going to be out camping. I'm going to finally relax from the stressful time I've been in recently, doing so much stuff. But any closing thoughts there, Fred? What's on your mind?
I mean, there's something I wanted to bring, and maybe it's not the most positive, but where the principle where the principle will be when people will be hungry or in fear. And this is the point that I contemplated upon that, and principle are good to an extent. In the society that we are living now, principle are not the big popular concept to be or to think. So for the individual, principle are basis, fundamental, or etiquette of how you behave into society and how you behave with yourself. But essentially, what we're trying to do with the great work and all these things is to put an emphasis on self responsibility and self care, because the problem is mental. So the solution will be in the mental realm. This is how we treat something that does, you cannot touch it. Fear, you cannot touch fear. You cannot touch tyranny, but you can see it. You can observe it. You can learn from it, because it's a mental thing. It's a prison inside your mind. And this is what we have to counter. Principles are good, and I stand on these principles of natural law, but life is life. And when you have to do the things to survive and take care of your relative, of your family, sometimes principle can maybe be tossed aside, for necessities. You know, yeah. I don't know if I made sense of that, but it's an important point, and I suggest everyone to contemplate and meditate on these questions. But because I mean, we're talking about principle and sending them in the air, but essentially, if you cannot understand them, it's useless. It's simple as that.
Yeah, and what I'm really taking away from what you're saying, Fred, too, is that there is the reality of the choices that people are making in the
Mm-hmm.
mass, and that includes us in a lot of ways. Even if we think we've kind of transcended it in some ways by starting to define the principles, we each still have to decide in reality, in the nitty
Yep.
gritty life, where we're going to take our stand. And
Yep.
that would be, I think, a good place to kind of where I'd like to leave folks off who might be watching or listening is definitely give thought to principles, try to define principles, but ultimately, um, as best you can,
Mm-hmm.
know what your boundaries are and where you stand and which principles that you're going to really abide by or stay close to or get as close as you can to, considering where you're at and what you're dealing with. um, Chris, Sarah, either of you want to add any closing thoughts on that? Oh, sorry, Sarah, I need to unmute you. I muted you because you were getting some background sound. Sorry about that.
Oh, maybe it was the AC. I just turned it off. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good.
I'm trying to be in a quiet room today. Yeah, like I mean, I totally agree with everything you guys said, and reality is like what Chris was saying. Reality is certainly not an illusion because we're experiencing it, which is what I think we're supposed to all be doing. Anyway, we're part of spirit or God or whatever people want at source. So I think it's a combination. We need to use all of these tools in our toolbox to be able to not just know and understand, you know, morality and the principles and ethical behavior, but practice them. And I do feel like I kind of like the way I think I try to work with people is not just like here's the information, take it in. I'm more like, okay, here's the information, but you tell me what you think about that, and then I kind of work with people to kind of get them to understand, because I think a lot of people, they're being blocked because of like what we have in our medicine and our food and our water is kind of like shutting down their brains to some capacity. So they can't just pick it up, and I think it's like a process of recreation for their own selves, their own fractions of spirit. So I do try, I agree with everything you guys said. Um, but I guess I do try to, I think everybody's got their own process of figuring a lot of this stuff out. And I have seen people actually grow in the right direction, or what I would say in the more, principle based or ethical, moral direction. And sometimes I think we're in a position in our society so far that, we need to kind of start healing. It's like healing the sick, as how I see it. And, we've been assaulted. And, if we didn't have what we had with our food and water and medicine, as poisonous as a lot of that, most of that is, we may not be in the position spiritually, globally, as a global family that we are in today. I think that has a lot to do with it. So I would always encourage everybody to just try to teach with love and gratitude and patience, even to those who would call you names and spit in your face over it, because they're all part of our human family. They're part of our community family. So that's what I would hope to see. At least that, lead by example.
That's very big-hearted of you, and I think if everybody could embrace humanity with that, we'd be in a lot better shape. So, Chris, thanks so much for joining me. It looks like you're not feeling so great today, but you're a king for pushing through and doing it anyway. Do you have any closing thoughts there? Or?
No, I'm good. I'm
Awesome.
the flu, cloudiness and headache has exacerbated. So I
Yeah,
don't
let's
feel like
all
saying more.
send Chris some healing vibes, and hope he's able to heal up, and your body will do its thing. Just drink a lot of water and be patient. I guess ultimately, patience, I think, is one of the best things we have to deal with all these problems. Is patience, care, and then also part of it is having a hard edge and knowing where enough is enough and where where we're going to draw our boundaries. And so I hope this conversation inspires and motivates folks to consider that, where you draw your boundaries, where you're going to take your stand, what principles mean to you. And the more of us that are thinking on those lines, the better off we'll all be, step by step, like Leslie said in the chat. Hey, thanks so much, Sarah and Fred and Chris, for coming
Thank you,
today. I
Chris.
really appreciate it. And we'll be back with more roundtables in the future. Thanks,
Take care.
folks.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Feel better, Chris.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
I'm in a cage, I'm in a prison, I'm in a mental prison, and a physical one at that, and definitely a spiritual one, whether that's recognized at a conscious level or not.
As I wake from my sleep, the situation's got me thinking deep. Will ever the same? In all life is in extinction, evil creeps in your dreams. Secret teams drawing memes, and the filling in the in-between.
Seed 5 Metamorphosis, September 23rd and 24th, a free online conference about the occult, esotericism, freedom, history, philosophy, symbology, and natural law. Register at seedtruth.com.